Now, for more on Brazil's political crisis and its impact on the economy, I'm joined by Andrea Murta, the Associate Director of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center here in Washington. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
So with this next level of the corruption scandal rocking Brazil at the moment, we're seeing these ongoing protests, issues with the market, stocks down nearly 10%. Just how damaging is all this for the economy?
It can be very damaging. Not that the economy was in a good place to begin with. There was some hope in the beginning of this year and late last year that the current government would steer the country in the right direction and be able to pass some reforms that are needed for fiscal equilibrium, and that would really move the economy forward. We did have some positive indicators. There was a slight growth in the economy in the first quarter of the year. But the recent developments really washed down some of that optimism. The markets are not the best indicator of that. They're very nervous and they react very quickly to the situation. They are still in a higher position than they were late last year, for example, when they were still optimistic about it. So I don't expect that the drop in the stock prices to be constant. It really will evolve together with the situation. There are some more structural problems that we see less hope of resolving now that the political situation is so serious, and that is the real problem for Brazil.
And what do you think they would perhaps be a better indicator of what's happening in the economy amid this scandal?
Well, I think GDP growth is one very important one. Although we had 1%, according to the government figures, growth in the past quarter, that was very optimistic and that had some, infused the country with some good feelings. But still, that was mostly due to agricultural exports and to a slight uptick in the manufacturing that we don't expect to continue necessarily, especially now that the trust in the continuation of the governability of the Temer administration is so harmed. Unemployment is very high. Unemployment is at almost 14%. That's almost 14 million people unemployed in Brazil. And that means low consumption, domestic consumption, and still low investment in the country. So the real economy, the agriculture or the industrial production, is still not showing signs of recovery.
And speaking of the investment landscape, how is this being viewed by global investors looking at what's happening in Brazil?
Oh, that's where it becomes interesting. FDI, foreign direct investments to Brazil, has actually been very resilient throughout this crisis. So just this past April, we had almost $6 billion inflow of investments from abroad. It's an $84 billion in the past 12 months, and that's very strong. There are still very good opportunities for the foreign investors that are looking into, for example, the energy sector in Brazil that's being really restructured after the crisis. So for the international community, Brazil is still a very good opportunity. The problem is how the domestic environment is responding to this.
And speaking of that domestic environment, how is the ease of doing business there, and who's really bearing the brunt of the economic pressures?
I think all of Brazil is bearing the brunt, really. There are very few sectors, including the commodities sectors, that with a cheaper currency is seeing some benefits from this in their exports. But other than that, and some in the financial sector, from the middle class down and in industries, everybody's feeling it. The ease of doing business in Brazil has not been in a good place for some time now, and we were hoping that these reforms would help the situation. For example, there's a huge hurdle in tax in Brazil, and there was some expectation that this government would tackle tax reform, but now with the current climate, that's unlikely to happen. So I don't see a very big improvement in ease of doing business going forward in the short term.
Now, how will the picture change for the economy and the markets, depending on whether Temer resigns or not?
More than the resignation of Temer, which, by the way, is very unlikely to happen. If he's ousted, it will probably be from the courts and not by his own initiative. But if that happens, I think the most important thing is who's going to replace him and how stable the country will be following that ousting, that potential ousting, until next year's elections in October. Because what people are looking for is some sort of stability in which they can plan the future and make the investments and and hire people and continue to push the economy forward.
And just quickly, Operation Car Wash unveiled a web of corruption. What can Brazil do to really change that image and get the trust back?
Oh, I think Brazil is in a very painful place that is not going to end soon. But it's a necessary transition. And I think we will emerge from this a better country. I think the political structure in Brazil is very old and archaic, and The crisis, the political crisis has affected every party, everybody, and there's no way that the things are going to continue as they are now. So political reform in a structural level is going to be difficult, but we're going to see a lot more engagement from the civil society. We're going to see a lot more oversight over politicians, and we are hopefully going to see some new voices coming up to move the country forward.
Certainly a change in the landscape is coming. Thank you so much. Andrea Murta, Associate Director with the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center.